It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, Jerry Caruso. Hey, Jerry, how are you?
Hey, good, Doug. How you doing?
Doing fine, thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. So, you're from New England, yeah? You're a Boston area guy?
I'm a Boston guy. I bleed Red Sox, Patriots, Celtics, and Bruins.
Oh,
Still do.
It's great. I grew up there. Boston's my hometown as well.
Oh, no kidding.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, but I lived there most of my life. I moved from there in 2005. And I'm in Las Vegas now. But Boston's always going to be my hometown. I've kind of lost my Boston accent, but it'll come back. If I talk to you for a half an hour, it'll come back, you know. It'll be there. So anyway.
It'll be back in a wicked amount of time.
Yeah, wicked. Wicked.
That's all we say. Everything's wicked.
Wicked Pissa. Yeah, that was the other
Wicked Pissa is the best one.
Yeah. All right, you still live there, right?
Yep.
And you're a stand-up comic. How'd you get started doing that?
Well, I actually, I got my training in Catholic school, believe it or not.
That's a good place. Yeah.
Parochial school was my stage. Nuns were eyeballing me left and right with a ruler in hand waiting to swipe at me. But I kept the kids from getting into trouble. I just started doing comedy in the schoolyard of St. Patrick's defunct elementary school. It's he's a defunct saint, or maybe he's back. I don't know. And then and then I carried on through high school. The last 2 years of high school, I entertained all the upperclassmen and kids in my class in the middle of a schoolyard. Nuns just shaking their heads walking by. I swear they were the same nuns from 8 years prior, but I'm not going to get into that. But and then I just played with it every once in a while. 1980, I was in a comedy contest, Class Clown. I finished third. But listen to this. Class Clown, my prize was a ham. You know, because you're a ham. I go, oh, my God. I did all this work for a piece of meat. Give me a break. And I stayed with it for 6 months doing open mics. And nobody supported me. Like, all my family's like, we'll be there, we'll be there, we'll be there. And every show would be less and less. I go, I can't do this. And then finally in 1993, I did a show at Digital Equipment Corporation, and they said, if you ever go to Nick's Comedy Shop, we'll follow you. And lo and behold, my first show, a school bus of inebriated friends of mine, 13 of them. None of them drove, trust me, but they showed up, and they were a great audience. And I had like a third of the audience, and I felt great about myself.
It's really hard to make a living as a stand-up comic, I think. I think it's even harder for you guys than for musicians, because there's less venues that will take you, for one thing. And I know that the pay was really lousy from other stand-ups that I've spoken to who have done open mics and done various clubs. And,
right,
you know, they were lucky to get $50, $100 for their set, yeah?
The only way you could make it as a comic on whatever money it is, whether it be 50, 100, 150, is if you lived in your mother and father's basement and you weren't married and you weren't on meds and you were an alcoholic. Mm-hmm. You were fine. You could live with it. Outside of that, it's a great hobby that I've had since 1993, and I love it. I love it with a passion. To make people laugh is such a high.
It is. And, you know, I have a lot of respect for stand-up comics because I can't really do that. I've done comedy skits and things. I studied acting a long time ago. But I always I was like the straight guy. I always needed the loony, you know, to sort of bounce off of, or he bounced off me or whatever. But I could never just do it on my own, standing up there. And it's different because I'm a musician. I can get up, I can sing, I can play piano or guitar, fine. But I think comics, it's a different sort of setup because you're a little more naked. You've got to do everything from scratch. No self-respecting comic uses notes. And you've also got the audience element. If you get a heckler, and if the heckler says something and you can't come back quickly with some kind of a smart response, you're done.
You lose.
You lose.
You lose. It's
Yeah.
so true.
Yeah.
So true. And how you said the word naked, I wouldn't want to see me naked, but that's beside the point. I want anybody to see me naked, even my mother. Even when I was a baby, she refused. But anyway, you are naked and alone behind a microphone, craving for attention, wanting everybody to love you, to love every minute that you're up there, and the slightest non-laugh or but I just crap on myself when there's non-laughter. I just make fun of it, and I someone told me once when I first started doing comedy, they go, "You look like you're having so much fun up on stage." And when I first started, I wasn't that funny, and so they said, "But you're not that funny." I go, "How should I take that? Is that a compliment or no?" It's like, you don't care. I go, "Well, I do care in a way, but you want them to like you first, and that's one of the most important things that I teach, because I teach stand-up comedy too. So
you
teach
teach stand-up comedy? Oh, now there's something we should get into.
God, yeah, I've been teaching that since 1999. I love it. It's
okay, how do you teach somebody to be funny?
You don't. You just get their money. That's all. That's the most important thing. No. So here's the thing. The first year I taught at a little community college near my front door called Mount Wachusett Community College, of course, because I'm big. When I did it, the radio station across the street goes, "We got to get you on." I go, "Why?" They go, "We want to find out about this introduction to stand-up comedy." And I'd only been in the business 6 or 7 years at that point. They go, "What is the secret element? What do people need? What is the tool? What is something that people need to take your class to be successful?" And I looked at them straight in the eye and I said, $80. That's it. That's all I can tell them. I go, everybody can be funny, but it depends how you present it, and I'll help people do that. But they didn't like the $80 comment. But it's true. You need $80 and you're in my course. I don't discriminate. Anybody can take it. And I've had students as young as 12 years old and as old as 84, 85.
Okay. I've always thought that you can't teach talent. That's just something that people are born with. And people who have that sort of natural comedic timing, you can see that in little kids when they're 2 and 3 years old, that they just got it, And where it came from.
Like, I could see it sometimes, but the most I could do to help them is try to teach them how to deliver it. Because I always tell people, you got to use emotion. They go, "What do you mean?" I go, "Well, you could tell a joke. You tell any joke, straight, and it's not going to get a laughter. But if you pack it with emotion, then people will laugh." Can I tell you one of my favorite jokes that a cancer patient told me once?
Yeah.
So this guy's driving a cab, beautiful nun in the back seat. He keeps looking in the back seat. The nun goes, "My son, do you have a problem? You keep peering at me." He goes, "No, sister. I'm sorry. I'm looking at you because you're a beautiful nun. I've always had a fantasy to kiss a beautiful nun. I'm so sorry." She goes, "Remove your hands from your face, my son, because that could happen if you meet 2 of the qualifications." He goes, "Really? What's that?" She goes, "You must be single and you must be Catholic." He goes, "Oh my God, I am. Both." And he stopped the cab, hopped in the back seat. She gave him the most sensual, unbelievable, romantic kiss. For 5 minutes, he hopped back in the front seat, starts driving his cab off. He starts crying his eyes out. The nun goes, "My son, do I detect tears?" He goes, "Yes, sister, I'm so sorry I lied to you. I'm not single. I'm not Catholic. I'm Jewish." She goes, "That's okay. My name is Kevin. I'm going to a costume party." So this is a cancer patient that told me this, because I do a lot of shows for cancer patients at a place called Hope Lodge, which you may have heard of, from the Cancer Society. And I give them free shows because, heck, they're going through all this crap, and I've had it in my family too. And least I could do is make them laugh, because these people are my heroes. And this little Italian guy comes up to me and goes, "Let me tell you some jokes." Jetty, you tell them on the stage. I go, "Absolutely." But that joke, if you told it straightforward, you're not going to get a laugh. If you put the emotion into it, you're going to get the laugh. People get the message.
Well, you're right. That joke requires you to be a little bit animated when you tell the story. If you told it like Stephen Wright, it wouldn't work at all.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah. Speaking of other comics, I don't know exactly how old you are, but I'm guessing
65.
You say, "Oh, okay, good." The reason I asked is because if I reference comics that I knew, we're kind of in the same age group. If you were 20, you might have ever heard of them. So back in the day, I'll start with that.
I love hearing that.
Yeah.
Back in the day.
People put out comedy records, and I remember having George Carlin's albums.
Yep, me too.
I'm trying to think. I can't remember who else.
Bill Cosby.
Oh yeah, he put out. He's one you don't want to talk about anymore.
No, I know. But I do admit one thing about him: he's a great storyteller. His jokes were all stories, and he'd do the voices. He'd make it animated, and he'd sell it. And he was clean humor. His show was successful. Those albums, me and my brother would listen to those scratchy albums every day because we thought they were so funny, and like George Carlin too. And another one I could date you way back was David Fry, who used to be a political impressionist.
Yeah,
and he did Nixon. He did Richard Nixon, and I love every bit of it. It's like, I didn't get some of the political humor, but I'm saying like, my God, he sounds just like him, and stuff like that. Yeah, the comedy albums, absolutely.
The reason I bring that up is because these days everything has gone digital. Everything is online. Everything is for download. Is there a platform for comics to upload, their bit and have people download it, like on Spotify?
I mean, there's always good old YouTube. There's always like, if you look at my site on Facebook, not as my site, it's their site. What am I talking about? You'll hear a lot of my Zooms, and a lot of my Zooms are, with comedians, but a lot of them are with, serious, people, because I like to spread the word for people. But, you can do that, or even these online shows, which I never thought I'd be a fan of. And since the pandemic, it's like you were forced to become a fan somehow. And I always tell people, look, if you're going to have a Zoom, leave the microphones on. No, we'll shut them off. That'll disturb you. I go, no. That's the whole thing behind it. I want to hear them laugh. I don't want to guess if they're laughing. I don't want to hear them falling. I don't want to see them falling asleep. I want to hear them laugh. And it becomes very successful. So I think a rite of passage between what happened with last year and even going into this year is like, just to have that is just like a great platform. Or have your own website and just download stuff on it, bits and pieces.
Okay, but there isn't a particular platform on the streaming services just for comics?
Not that I know of. I'm showing my age, but...
Well, I don't know either. I mean, Spotify, to me, when I think of Spotify, I think of either music or podcasts.
Yeah, like if I look up certain comics and, they have bits, like I can get them anywhere or just YouTube them, and then I'll get their bits. Like a good friend from way back when, who he probably doesn't remember me now, is Bill Burr. I think Bill Burr is a genius, but I'll hear some of his stuff. And, Justin McKinney is another one, a good friend from way back, and I'll hear some of his stuff when me and my wife will listen to it. She goes, why can't you be that funny? I go, we're not listening to this guy anymore, I would tell her. No, but I mean, you could just YouTube stuff. That's the good thing. You could YouTube, like true. I'll YouTube the roast. Like one of my favorite was Greg Giraldo before he passed, and he was a genius at insulting people. He went deep, but he was quick, and that's why I love doing crowd work too with people. I try to talk about them, but not hurt them in a vile way, just to get them involved in the show and make them a part of it, and they feel like they've had their 1 minute of fame.
Well, I think the other problem with doing a comedy record and doing bits pre-recorded and putting them up is they really got to be recorded live. If you don't have that audience there, it loses a whole dimension of the performance. I mean, imagine like George Carlin's albums and take the audience away.
Oh, God.
You know what I mean? It just wouldn't be nearly as funny. No, it would ruin it. So I think that's so funny. Yeah, that's another issue with doing a comedy recording.
Well, I did an online show for a veterans group up in Maine, again, because I'm big, and so I'm joking. So I did it, and so my friends were watching it. 3 of us were on there. My friend Danny Bullis opened, my good friend Bob, he featured, and I closed it. And they were saying, like, Danny and his wife were saying, like, we can't believe you. You're telling the jokes, and you're calling out people, and there's nobody there. But you made it funny by doing that. Like, how many Italians out there? Come on, how many Italians? I see you. There are a few of you out there. You'll know what I'm talking about. And I'm going on, and they go, we don't know who you were talking to. I go, that's why I do comedy, because there's something wrong with me probably, and I'm having fun with it. And I try to make people a part of it. And then people commented afterwards saying, like, I can't believe, like, I was really at a show. So, by the grace of God, I was able to pull it off.
One last thing I want to bring up, and then we got to kind of wrap this up, is PC cancel culture. Now, that's something that has seriously affected stand-up comics. And I had a guy on named Ted Balaker, who was a film producer who made a film called Can We Take a Joke? And it's a documentary film. You'd probably enjoy it. I don't know if you've seen it.
I got to look it up. Yeah, definitely.
Can We Take a Joke by Ted Balaker. And it's a documentary film. He had a lot of pretty famous people on there. Lisa Lampanelli.
Oh, I worked with Lisa. She's a sweetheart.
Yeah, everybody says that she's great. Let's see, who else was in that? Adam Carolla, Gilbert Godfrey, a bunch of different people that you would recognize. Anyways, they were just talking about how the PC cancel culture has flipped the whole industry of stand-up comedians because, and then they kept referencing Lenny Bruce, who was certainly one of the great masters of the day.
Oh, absolutely.
But back in the day, Lenny was getting arrested on stage because he was saying things that were considered obscene and lewd and whatever. But he was always welcome on the college campuses. That was like his safe haven. They loved him. He could be as dirty as he wanted. He could say whatever he wanted. The kids loved him. Nowadays, the college campuses are like the places that no comics want to go because the environment is so toxic because of the PC culture. And I just wanted to get your take on that.
Yeah, I mean, I've done colleges a long time ago, but I've noticed that change. The only thing that makes it safe for me, because I make fun of myself, so I'm not. Although I'll tell you one thing, I did a show at a college in New Hampshire, Franklin Pierce University, and one woman spoke out against me. She says, "You are prejudiced to Italians." I go, "Lady, I'm an Italian. I can say that. I'm not making fun of us. You're making fun of your mother." I go, "That's my mother. She never comes to my shows. She don't care." But they canceled me for 3 shows I had to do for them after the fact. And then the Cancer Society said to me, we had to do it because she was a senior board member. I go, "How old was she?" They said she was in her 70s. I go, "Was she Italian?" They said no. So this was years ago when people were trying to think like, "Oh, look at what you're doing. That's so embarrassing. The Italians will be embarrassed." I go, the bulk of the people that like my act are Italian, and it's mixed age groups that like my act because I'm making fun of me. So yes, the cancel culture has really played a role in like hurting comedy big time, and that's not right because there are things you get away with, but you could do it tastefully. There's a ways around it, but people are just afraid. Like no one wants to go to colleges. Like I'd be the same way. But then again, if they saw my act, I don't think they'd invite me. But I mean, if they did, I would take that chance. But I wouldn't even tiptoe. I just do my act and go with it and see what happens. But I try not to do anything that's offensive. But I know people who are very talented and dig deep into things, and they do it in a great way. But yeah, I think they would tell them, nope, you can't come. Sorry, nope, you're out of here. We ain't having you. Sorry, we need someone clean. We need a folk singer. Yep, have someone sing about wheat germ and granola bars and stuff like that. Yep, sure. And then one woman got mad at me because I made a political statement, not in a bad way. I said, "Support your president." The one woman went ballistic. And I told her, "Are you trying to ruin this benefit for an ALS patient? Are you serious?" And the crowd booed her, and she left crying. And then her husband goes, "I'm going to take care of you." I go, "Sir, please, go comfort her." I says, "Remember what I said about the ALS patient? He's right here in the wheelchair. Do you want me to introduce you to him?" And he got angry, and he stormed out. But it's like, just because I said support your president, and the woman took it differently, and the crowd booed her and got her out of the stage, and off the stage, and told me to continue, and they loved me, and it was really, thank God. But yeah, cancel culture, we could do without.
Well, I agree. And you think about somebody like the comedy greats like Rickles, he wouldn't stand a chance today. I mean, not a chance.
God. It's funny you say that about him. Check this out. When me and my brother were kids, and you remember when Don Rickles, I mean, his high time seemed to be 60s and 70s, and he was doing great. We'd stay up and fool our Italian mom and dad like we were going to bed. We'd turn on the TV really low, have our ears glued to the speaker. I'd be holding the antenna because we had the rotary antenna.
Oh yeah, those were great days.
I was the middle child to go, "Just stand there." But we'd hear him, we'd be dying laughing, and hearing some of the stuff that he'd say, the slang words that he used. Oh my God, you're right. But yet he was successful and people loved him. And like you said too, guys like back in the 90s or the 80s. I saw Buddy Hackett, who was dirty, and like you said, the colleges loved him. They embraced him. Or they had Henny Youngman, some of the great comics. But like you said, Don Rickles, this is great. Yeah, nowadays, you're not allowed. Sorry, can't have you.
Well, here's how bad it's got. After I did the interview with Ted about his film, we were just talking off mic, and he said that one of the people he interviewed for the movie, but he didn't get in the movie, he didn't want to be in the film, was Jerry Seinfeld.
Oh, yeah.
And he said that even Jerry won't go on college campuses. Now, you think about that. Jerry Seinfeld's comedy is about as benign as it can get.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, and even the show, the very successful Seinfeld show was what? Much to Do About Nothing was sort of the subtitle, right? And it was just completely innocuous stuff. He won't go to college campuses. So if he won't go, imagine anybody who does any kind of political humor, social humor, ethnic humor, forget it. They wouldn't have a chance.
It's totally crazy. And I remember reading that story when he talked about it. He was very vehement about it. He goes, no way. They could offer me all the money in the world. He goes, it's just not even worth it. It's just, it's like, you know, they can't do this to us. And he's absolutely right. And it's like, come on, lighten up. Isn't comedy about laughing? That's what I thought it was. I don't know. Maybe it's me, you know. Maybe I got it wrong, you know. Maybe I've been wasting my time for 27 plus years, you know. But I agree with him. You know, it's hard to set foot and, you know, do that and be ridiculed over it or criticized, you know. And yet you're right. His humor is so benign. It's like
it's like nothing. It's so vanilla. And it's you know, he talks about, you know, dog food. I mean, something, how could you offend anybody? You know, he talks about canned soup or cereal or something. I mean, it's just yeah, exactly. Jerry, we got to wrap this up. We are out of time. Do you have a website that you want to give out?
Sure. It's long. So
it's long.
www.jerry with a J G Caruso Caruso comic at webs.com. See? I told you.
Okay, well, you know, people just have to know how to spell. And they should
or YouTube Jerry Caruso. There's a Jerry Caruso fisherman. That's not me. He's probably more successful than me. And there's me, the comedian from the Boston area. So, Doug, it's been a real pleasure, honestly.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. And best of luck. I think it's great that you're doing this as a sort of the helping the charities and the cancer patients. I think that's very admirable. So,
well, you know, I think it's the right thing to do, and if I can make them laugh for what they're going through, or help people raise money for a cause, or you know, help somebody whose child is sick, why not? I mean, you know, God gave me the ability to make people laugh, and so let me give it back, and that's a good way to give it back. And it's just Comics for a Cure has been so successful. It's been the greatest thing in the world, and I'll keep doing it, you know, until people say, "Hey, you're not funny anymore."
All right, Jerry, take care. Thanks for coming on the show.
Doug, it's been a pleasure. Take care.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on the Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of the Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
Love coffee, huh? But wait a minute. It seems like every time you finish a cup of coffee, you get all of these side effects along with it. heartburn, indigestion, upset stomach, acid reflux. As the world's first and only organic acid-free coffee, Tyler's Coffee is able to provide a healthier option in the solution for more than 100 million individuals who have sensitive stomachs or suffer from acid-related modalities. This is Tyler's acid-free coffee. Coffee without the consequences.
Hi, this is John Morgan, production supervisor for DJC Productions. You're listening to The Douglas Coleman Show.
Okay, please welcome to The Douglas Coleman Show, W.L. Hawkin. Hey, Wendy, how are you?
I'm really good. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for coming on the show. So you're an author and you're in Canada. Where in Canada are you?
I'm just east of Vancouver in the country, actually.
Okay.
In the Fraser Valley.
Why don't you give us a little bit of your backstory? I know you got a book to promote. Your book is called To Kill a King. Just tell us a little about yourself first, and then we can talk about your book.
About myself. Well, I've been writing a long time. I also taught for many years, and while I was teaching high school, I needed a way to relieve stress, so I started writing an urban fantasy series on the weekends and over the summer. I'm pretty introverted too, so it was a good way for me to have some fun because I don't do a lot of going out. And it's developed into a 4-book series, and the last one is To Kill a King. The whole series follows one major character who is the high priest for a Wicca coven out of Vancouver, and they solve murders and end up in thrillers, and there's all sorts of a merging of genres here.
Okay, what does urban fantasy actually mean? I know there's so many genres. I'm totally confused. What's what?
You know, to me, urban fantasy is kind of another word for it. Might be mythic fiction, but it's basically contemporary, and sometimes it's set in a city, which is where you get the urban. I don't usually set too much in the city because I'm not really a city person. But what happens there is that you have the option to add a little bit of magic, add some supernatural characters. So you could have anything from fairies, witches, vampires, gods, demons. That's where urban fantasy goes.
Are you self-published or do you have a traditional publisher?
I'm an indie publisher. I've been doing everything for myself.
Okay. Any particular reason? I always like to ask this question to sort of set up the debate between indie versus traditional, because there's pros and cons on both sides of that. Why did you choose to go indie versus a traditional publisher? Right.
Well, when I wrote the first book, which is To Charm a Killer, it was probably 2010 that I finished it, and I was excited about it, and it's kind of cross genre. So a lot of traditional publishers at that point, for sure, urban fantasy wasn't a huge thing like it is now. Like, you're going to see a lot more of that now than you did then. And so I wanted to get it going, and I tried a few publishers kind of half-heartedly, and then decided I would just put it out there myself because I just wanted to see it out there. And the thing with that is that once you start a series, no publisher wants to touch you. If you've put out your first series as a self-published author, so this is good for people to know, the publishers don't want you after that. So you have to go through the entire series and finish it before you can go to them with a new series or a new book.
Why is that? Why would they not want it?
Well, that's kind of their rule. They don't want it unless you're selling like 50, 100,000 copies. Then they'll pick it up. But if it's like a small kind of smoldering small thing, they don't want to bother. They want it first. I don't know, because I'm not, I'm not a traditional publisher, but I've talked to a lot of agents at different conferences, and that's what I've got over the years. So I just basically continued writing this series because I couldn't put it down, and learned how to do this, and got a whole lot of new hats. So
Okay. Well, it's interesting. Yeah. It's interesting to me because I have this conversation with authors and then try to make some kind of a parallel with the music industry, because I've been a lifelong musician and I've had a lot of music artists on this show. We promote indie music. And it seems to me that people these days, there's something called earned media. It's kind of a jargon term. But the definition of that has changed over the years. And these days, like record labels, which would be the equivalent of a traditional publisher for an author, for a musician to get to sign a deal with a record label would be sort of a parallel, kind of the same thing. The record labels don't want to take their chances on an unknown. And which used to be the case, you know, the old story of some guy sitting in a little cafe singing his heart out and he gets discovered. That doesn't really happen anymore. The record labels want to see a track record of strong social media following, having some success on internet with YouTube views and downloads and things. They want to see that you're already established before. And there seems to be a magic formula of a number. I had a fairly famous musician tell me that if you get 10 million views on your music video on YouTube, you will get a record deal. Okay.
Wow. Okay.
Which is a lot, but they definitely want to see a track record. They don't want to take a nobody anymore like they used to. So I'm wondering if that perhaps is the same issue with the publishers not wanting to take a series that's already in the works, because unless, like you said, your series has sold 100,000, 200,000 copies. But I don't know. I mean, let's just say you started out with one book, you don't have a series going. I mean, what are your chances of getting picked up by a publisher?
Yeah, that's another question, and I don't think they're great unless it's something that they are really looking for. Where an agent or a publisher had said, "I'm looking for this particular book," and you can kind of craft it and give it to them. Then they might, I think.
Okay.
Maybe.
Well, because it seems to me it's like a catch-22 where you've got to be established before they're even going to look at you. But if you're already established, then why would you want to go with them? Because you're only turning over.
Yeah, I like that. That's true. It's true, because then you're just giving chunks of your income away.
Exactly. And whether they can bump you up to a next level or not, I don't know. What are they going to do that's any different? So I guess my question is, what, based on your experiences and things that you've discovered in your travels, what is the basic, pros and cons to a traditional publisher versus self-publishing?
What I like about being an indie publisher is having a lot of control. So I have control over when I put my book out. I can do it a lot quicker than a traditional publisher, where you might write the whole thing and then have to wait 2 years to see it actually come to fruition and go out there. And I think you lose a little bit of momentum in the waiting. So there's that. And then there's just being able to have so much input into my covers, for example. So I sat down with a cover artist. It's a graphic artist, and we recently completely redid all my covers as the tattoo editions. So they're all tattoos worn by characters in each book, which makes them kind of special. And I like that. So a traditional publisher might not want to go there. They might have a certain look for a book and say, this is your cover. So there's that. I've learned a whole lot in terms of how to format a book. So I do all my own formatting and, creating the print copy and the email and everything else. So I've learned a lot as an indie publisher, which I think is helpful to me. A traditional publisher would have probably more reach. And, I think they can maybe present you to their thousands and thousands of readers and put your book up in a place that my book might not get.
Well, that's an interesting point, because that's always been my comparison in the music industry, is the basic difference between a major label and the indies is that the major labels still have the marketing and distribution wrapped up, where the indies don't. But the indies have taken away the power of production from the major labels, and I think that that's the same thing in the literary world, where you can create a book. There's programs out there where it can be formatted and it can look beautiful, and you can self-publish through Amazon or one of those programs. But then what do you do? You know, then how do you get it out there? They have a distribution and a marketing whole division. You're on your own, right?
Which is why I'm really excited that I now have a publicity person, because I didn't have that before. And that's making life a whole lot more interesting and better for me, because that's a piece that was missing out of my puzzle. There's only so many things that like one woman can do, you know, and it's like having a whole lot of full-time jobs and switching hats all the time to do these different things. Yeah. So the other piece around traditional versus indie is I have discovered there is still a bit of a stigma attached to being self-published. I don't even like that word, self-published. So that's why I use indie published. It has a little bit more panache to it. But often, you know, you'll see people that have won this contest and that contest, and their novel was in this and that. And a lot of contests won't take a self-published author still, which to me is a little bit discriminatory. So they go to the traditional publishers to get the people for their contest. And then those people get to win them, and then that just gets them further up the ladder.
Okay, I see what you mean. So there's still a stigma about self-publishing, is that you're just not as good as somebody who's traditionally published. Is that the takeaway from that, or supposed to be? Yeah,
that is kind of how it is. It's like, well, you couldn't get anybody to publish you, so you published it yourself, and so it can't be great. You know, I mean, that's that kind of thing. I mean, there are good things happening. There are, you know, awards and contests now for indie publishers that are recognizing that, hey, there are some amazing books out here and some amazing indie publishers. So, well, yeah, you know, I think that will shift.
I think that it's I think it's hit and miss. I mean, personally for me, and I'll go back to music because I'm more familiar with it, but I think the better artists are indie these days than the ones that are signed to the major labels, because the major labels have shifted their priorities from music to image. And I mean, that started way back in the 80s with MTV, but they've really taken it to the nth degree now. Similarly with movies, if you notice, the major studios are all doing Marvel Comics and heavy CGI kind of event type movies, where the indie filmmakers are doing the romantic comedies and the dramas and the ones with the great storylines. I'm not seeing as much of that coming from the major studios, because they're more interested in the blockbuster kind of, you know, heavy effects type movies that draw. Well,
they also...
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, they also want... The studios, movie studios, want something that the entire family can go to, too. I remember having that discussion with somebody. So they want you to, you know, grandpa and grandma can take the grandkids to see Marvel Comics, whatever. So they're going to make more money at that. And that's kind of where that's based. So they're a rom-com. Yeah, they might not do that. You might not be able to do that with the whole family.
Well, that's true. And by the same token, though, it would be very difficult for an indie guy to create a movie like Star Wars, simply because he wouldn't have the facility to do it. They still sort of, you know, that's an expensive thing to do. You'd have to have a massive studio and hundreds of people in order to pull that off. Indies just don't have the budget. The difference is with music and movie is that an indie can make an album that sounds every bit as good as something that was made at Sony.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, as long as the writing is there. But I mean, the technology is easy enough to do at home. Technology for a big, full-budget CGI movie still isn't really quite in the hands of the indie people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so there is a bit of difference there. And in terms of the cost, I mean, you're looking at $200 million plus to do one of those films. Most indie guys don't have that kind of money. But it doesn't cost that much to make an album, and it doesn't cost that much to write a book. So the playing field is much more level for authors and for musicians, I think, than for filmmakers. But that's a topic and a conversation for another show. Can you give us like a 1-minute synopsis of your latest book, To Kill a King?
I can. Shall I just read the back cover?
Whatever you want to do.
It's a time travel book, and it's set in Iron Age Ireland. An archaeologist from book 2 actually gets a chance to go to Iron Age Ireland, and there she meets the real Old Croghan man. Now, Old Croghan man is a bog body, and he was dug up in 2003 for real, not fictionally, from the Midlands in Ireland. And so she gets to meet him, and she knows what his fate will be. So she decides she's going to save him from his fate. So it's a prehistoric thriller. She's in a world of druids. She's from the future, and my main protagonist, who's in all 4 books, is also there. He comes there to try and rescue her when he realizes she's trapped in Iron Age Ireland. That's their story, is how they get out of this. Can they get home? Can she save this man? What will happen to them when they're there?
We do have to kind of wrap this up. We are out of time. Do you have a website that you want to give out?
I do. It's bluehavenpress.com.
And you have links to social media and stuff on there as well? 'Cause we'll check it out. We like to follow our guests.
I do. And I have all about the books and where you can find them and buy them. And everything is there.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing with us. Best of luck with the book. I hope it does well.
Thank you so much.